recording. There we go. I had a couple people already request that. So thank you, Dr. Cortman, for returning for part 2 of this 5-part series. We're very excited and we got some great feedback on the last one. If you want to give us a brief introduction as to today's topic, and thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate that. I am happy again to be here and thrilled to be able to see not just my own face in the right-hand corner, but a picture of myself in the middle of the page. I still would love to see my audience, but I can't see any of you. And I was thinking, I just asked my wife, isn't there a show where you don't get to see the other person? And you just talk to them the whole time, and at the end you end up getting married to them. And she said, yeah, that's Love is Blind. So if at the end of this I end up married to my audience, we're going to know what happened. So this is part 2. We're working on I'm reaching here to get a couple of books. I'm going to be talking about, again, the book, my first book, Your Mind, an Owner's Manual for a Better Life. And this book has 10 simple truths that I was hoping to get through at least part of each one of those truths in these 5 hours, these 5 webinars. And they were rewritten for adolescents in this book called The Social Black Belt. So we were on the first truth last time. And just a very quick review, we talked about how our emotions do not have to be strange visitors from another planet, that we actually can understand them. And we talked about our emotions coming not from what happens, never from what happens, but always from our perception of what happens. And then we talked about our emotions always being statements about me. My emotions are always statements about me, and your emotions are statements about you. And then we talked about my emotions / feelings. I use those terms interchangeably, that they're always a statement about my investments. The only thing that has the power to make me feel are things that I'm invested in. I didn't mention the Jesus quote that said, where a man's treasure is, there will his heart be also. Whatever you're invested in, that's what has the power to make you feel. And then the fourth thing that I mentioned was that all of our emotions send a message to us. And I likened them onto the dummy lights on the dashboard of the car, that your anxiety means something. It means that you perceive a threat. There's an investment that you have, and you perceive a threat to the investment. Sadness, you perceive a loss. Anger, you perceive a violation. They're always messages. And our goal is to respond well to these messages and put those dummy lights out, not drive the rest of our lives with the guilt light on, but to see it at my guilt feelings or a call to action, to respond better, to apologize, to make amends, to do what I have to do and put the light out. I just released a video this week about a man who many years later is living with so much guilt because he was unfaithful to his wife while his 2 girls were teenagers. And he just beats himself and berates himself. He's married to a different woman now. It's been a long time since he's cheated on anybody, but he continues to do this. And it's like, that energy that you're using to beat yourself up with guilt, it doesn't help anyone. It just demotes you. What if we took the same energy and we spent that energy promoting your grandkids, letting your children know on the regular that you're very invested? The girls have forgiven him. It was like 25 years ago or so. Let's move on and use that energy to love and promote them, not to demote self. So we don't drive the rest of their life with the guilt light on. We take action. And then at the end of last month's presentation, I talked about the acronym that I created. Here are 7 things that healthy people think and do that promotes happiness and well-being, and interestingly enough, longevity. All 7 of these things are associated with people living happier and longer lives. And I alluded to that last time. I mentioned what the 7 things were, but today I want to talk about them in a little more depth, and then hopefully get on to the second and third truths with as much time as I could devote to them. So if you recall, the word that the 7 words spelled out was forgive. Forgive, for those of you who need that help. And the F word in forgive is actually forgiveness, that this is what healthy people do. I'm working with a lovely lady right now. She's like 30 years old. And she came in going through what's going to end up as a divorce, but she has these old things that she needs to work through. She needs to let go. I'm working with her, and I'm giving her an assignment, one thing at a time, to let go, to forgive. Forgiveness only has to mean let go. I teach people that forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is not equaling the score. It's not vengeance or revenge. Forgiveness is merely letting go. And I teach them that there are 2 types of forgiveness. There's forgiveness with reconciliation, and there's forgiveness without reconciliation. So in some cases, I'm going to say I'm letting go of what that person did to me, and that's all I want. I just want peace about it. I'm not going to try to, recreate a relationship with that person. I just want to move past what they did to me. So back to this woman, one of the first things that I had her do was to write a letter to a man who raped her and took her virginity away from her. He put something in her in a drink, gave it to her to drink, and next thing you know, he's doing terrible things to her in a wooded area somewhere. And she writes this letter, and she's outraged. How dare you? How dare you do this to 15-year-old me? But the letter doesn't stop there. I teach people we're going to talk about, this is what happened. This is what you did. This is how it felt to be me at the time. This is how it's impacted me since. And then finally, here's what I'm doing now to let you go. And this is forgiveness without reconciliation. She doesn't want a relationship with this man. What she wants is to be finished with that negative energy, to let that go. Forgiveness prompts me to say, I want my high functioning patients to be able to let go of everything painful, everything toxic, everything sad, everything traumatic. Our job is to help you to put all of that away so you're not carrying it forward. Why? Because whenever you hate someone or you have resentment towards them, it's not only a toxin and a poison in your body, it promotes negative things in your body like cancer, like heart disease. Resentment is bad for people. And so the goal is to empty that, to finish that, to overcome that. I had an 82-year-old woman in session one day, and she said to me, so if I hear you, doctor, you're telling me you want me to let go of everything that makes my head crazy. And I just stopped. I put my pen down. I stood up. I walked over to the desk and I wrote that down. And I turned to her and said, that's the best definition of forgiveness that I've ever heard. Yes, I want you to let go of everything that makes your head crazy. Whatever is still haunting you, whatever is depressing you, whatever's causing you disruption in your sleep, whatever it is that makes you resentful, miserable, bitter, overly sensitive, pushing people and potential love relationships away, whatever you have not recovered from, the F word is forgiveness. I mentioned two types. The other type is forgiveness with reconciliation. If you're married to somebody and you intend to stay married to them, you have to not only forgive, but you have to, dismiss it. Don't love keeps no record of wrongdoings, it says in the Corinthians, the Paul's letter to the Corinthians. Like, you gotta let go of the negativity and forgive and reconcile the relationship, or the marriage is not going to work. The marriage is not going to work. I remember a woman saying to me, I want to stay married, but I'm never going to forgive my husband. It's like, yeah, that's great, except it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're going to end up being, and she's like, well, I'm not going to forgive anything. I'm not going to, and they got divorced. But anyway, so that's the F word. I don't want to spend the whole time, but I could spend the whole hour, because the research is very clear on this. If you want to be well, you got to let go of all the terrible things that happened to you. And you don't just let them go. There's a process, right? And we're going to talk about that process in all 5 weeks here. Remember, feel, express, release, and reframe. That's how we get to this place of forgiveness. What else do I want to say about that? Let me just move on to the O word, which is optimism. Optimism is fascinating to me. By the way, there's a great book called Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. And Marty was a former president of the American Psychological Association. He was involved in a lot of great research. But one of the things he learned is that you can teach people to start thinking differently and to be more optimistic. Why is it important to be optimistic? Because we have research that says when you're optimistic, your outcomes are better. In cancer, if you have cancer, one of the things I would teach you if I was the psychologist on the team is you got to think positively about this, because according to the research, your outcomes are better when you think positively. And same thing is true with pregnancy. Optimistic people have better outcomes with pregnancy. It's people who are optimistic are far less likely to be depressed. They live longer, right? They have less anxiety. Why? Anxiety is about the perception of threat to future things. If you're optimistic, you're not living in that everything's dangerous, everything's scary. You're thinking, hey, things are going to work out. They're going to be okay. And optimism really requires some type of faith that says things are going to be all right. They're going to work out in the end. It's going to be okay. The R word is relationships. And the greatest link to happiness, we now know this from our research, is loving relationships. And you might say, what kind? And I'll say all kinds. If we just studied friendship, if we only looked at friendship, there's enough research on friendship and the importance of good quality connections, that people who are connected with other friends live longer and are happier. I don't know that I mentioned this in the last time, forgive me if I did, but one of the classic studies on this was JFK's sophomore class out of Harvard. They followed these men throughout their lives, and one of the biggest conclusions they drew is that men who had friendship, men who had meaningful connections, relationships with other men, other friends, were much more likely to be happy. A lot of these guys were very wealthy and successful. They were Harvard graduates, but the ones who had the friends were happier people who lived longer. Again, I don't know what I said last time, but we had studies of little old men who researchers said, we're going to try a little experiment, and they cut the group into half, and they said, for the next 2 years, you guys are going to join a service club or a social club, and the other group, no. And they came back 2 years later, and the men who were forced to join a group were statistically significantly more likely to be alive, because they had friends, they had things to do, they had places to go. One of my favorite studies about friendship is that people actually digest food differently when they're eating with their friends. And one person who studied the research said, let me put it to you this way, it's healthier to eat Twinkies with your friends than it is to eat broccoli alone. Just being with other people, laughing with other people, hanging out with other people, having people to turn to, having people to express your feelings, support groups. What about long-term relationships? It's overwhelmingly positive, especially for men, that married men or men in long-term relationships, even if they haven't, officially been married, they have so many more positive things according to the research. They make more money, they have lower blood pressure, they drink less, they smoke less, they have more sex, they have happier relations. The fantasy of being the Playboy bachelor, it's not substantiated by the research. Married men are happier. And when women, I think for women, we have some research that may contradict it, but overall, if a woman is not in an abusive relationship, if she's in a solid and stable long-term relationship, it's in her best interest and she's happier as well. The G word is gratitude. Grateful people are happy. Happy people are grateful. And what the researchers have found is that you don't have to be a grateful person. You can learn. You can actually learn to be grateful. And what does that mean? I would encourage children from an early age, write down every day 3 things that you're grateful for. Talk about every day who you're grateful towards. We have research studies that say that people who had the opportunity to express gratitude to another person improved in their depression than any other group in a research study who were treated with different therapies, different medications and such. The group that did the very best was a group that was allowed to express their gratitude towards others. We have research that says when you think thoughts that make you feel angry or resentful, it actually ages the body. But when you think thoughts of gratitude or praise, it actually reverses aging. And so just looking out the window and saying, like, it's beautiful. Like, today's the first day of summer, which means we only have 6 more months of summer heat in Florida. Just being grateful is just, it's good for me to be grateful. I actually feel better if I'm focusing on my gratitude. There's one other study where people, just by practicing grateful thoughts, brought their blood pressure down. They were having better relations at home. They were making more money at work. It just did so many positive things. And they were compared with 2 other groups. One group was asked to write down 3 things that happened every day. And the other group was asked to write down 3 complaints they had every day. And the group that made all the changes were the ones who were asked, write down 3 things that you're grateful for. And again, you can do this now in your life, however old you are. It's not too late to start practicing gratitude. The I word is investment. And investment really means you have to have purpose in life. We have research that says people who think life has no meaning, people who think that there's no purpose to life, who think you're just here, for 70, 80 years and then you die. What's the point of this? They don't do as well. They're more depressed. They accomplish less. They're not happy people. And what we understand is that when people believe that there's purpose to their life, when they're invested in things, when they think what they do matters, when they think other people matter, when they have causes, and the causes can be as simple as your grandchildren, and the causes could be, climate change. Your causes could be saving the whales, saving heathens, saving stamps. I mean, whatever you want to save, there needs to be a sense of my life has purpose. My life has meaning. I have things to do while I'm here. There's not even enough time to do all the things I want to do because my life has purpose and has meaning. And by the way, let me go off on a little bit of a tangent. Religion. We have fascinating research on religion, and you're going to like this. All religion helps people psychologically if they believe in positivity, like there's a loving God or there's benevolence in the universe, like their sins are forgiven or there's a heaven next, or, if there's goodness, you lose all of the good stuff if you believe in a fire and brimstone kind of a pissed off old guy in the sky who's ready to drop an anvil on your head. All of the psychological benefits, which include less anxiety, more joy, dying more easily, meaning it's safer to die because I believe I'm going to a better place, recovering from divorce and recovering from illness, all those kinds of things, according to the research, religious people or people of faith, I should say, who have that positive sense, they do better. They even go to the dentist more. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but people of faith do better if there's positivity to their faith. All right. And that investment thing leads to the next word, which is volunteering. Volunteers, taking some time out of self to jump into someone else's life, to try to make a difference in somebody else's life. You feel better about yourself when you're a volunteer. Volunteers live longer. People who give to others live longer and they're happier. It is more blessed to give. We have research that says people who give, people who are kind, people who are generous are happier people than those who are selfish, people who are more miserly. They're not typically happy people. A couple of neo-Freudian guys, people whose works have been around for like 100 years. Alfred Adler, I really like Alfred Adler's work. And he would talk about having depressed patients. And what he would do invariably with these depressed people is to help them find a cause to invest in someone else's life. Getting my mind off of me and trying to make a difference in the lives of others, according to Adler, was one of the best treatments for depression. Another guy that a lot of you have heard of, Erik Erikson, he was known for his, I'm not hallucinating or anything. There really was a bug. And I think I got him on the first try. So I'm feeling really good about myself at this point. But there he is flying. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. Still looking for the bug. Erik Erikson talked about these 8 stages of a man's life. And there's a conflict that had to be overcome in every one of these stages. Like for infants, it was trust versus mistrust. Healthy babies had to learn how to trust and overcome that sense of mistrust in order to advance to the next stage. Well, he talked about the last stage as being the conflict was generativity versus stagnation. What does that mean? He postulated that older people, in order to not feel put out to pasture and worthless, that they had to feel like they could help the generations beneath them, that they could make a difference, that they had wisdom, or they had monies, or they had time, or they had things to donate. They had time to make the generations beneath them better. That's volunteering them times, as opposed to feeling the worst thing you could feel is a sense of stagnation. Like, what am I doing here? I worked with a man years ago who had the most interesting life of anyone I had ever talked to. I mean, this guy was working for a major network, and he was a camera guy, and his stories were incredible. He had Sinatra at his house for a week. He was in a few feet away from Bobby Kennedy when he was assassinated. he had a chance to interview the Japanese guy who set up the Pearl Harbor attack. He was on the last helicopter out of Korea when we were pulling out of the war there. He has so many incredible stories. And I said, well, why don't you tell these stories? They're amazing. He goes, I'm a dinosaur. His wife had died. He had one kid living on the other side. He's like, nobody needs me. No one wants to hear my stories. And finally, I said, I have an idea. I have a friend who likes to write. Why don't you sit down with her and write your memoirs, write a book? And they did. And suddenly the guy came to life. Like he had a purpose. He had something to do. He could tell the stories of his amazing life. We need to have stuff to do. We need to feel purpose. We have to matter if we're going to be well. And that leads to actually one more thing. There was a longevity expert, a guy who used to be an anesthesiologist, but then he went into the field of longevity, studying who lives longer and why they live longer. And one of the things this guy said in a lecture is, don't ever retire. He said, because all the research says retired people die very soon after. He said, but if you have to retire, find something else to dive into. We need stuff to do that matters. We have to have purpose. There are some people who are creative and they're doing artwork and they're doing music, and it's like they don't have time to die. They're going into their 80s and 90s and they're loving their lives because they have stuff to do. They have purpose. All right. And that's the V word, which is volunteering. Let's move on to the E word, which is, some of you might not like this word so much, but it's exercise. And oh my God, there's so much research about exercise, but I want to go over some of it with you. First of all, one of the leading experts in this realm said, let me put it to you this way. If we could put exercise in a pill, it would be the very first thing your doctor would prescribe for you, no matter what illness you have. You got MS, you got lupus, what do you got? Cancer? Here's your exercise pill. Now we got to get you some other medications for, this particular disorder. But everybody would get an exercise pill. Why is that? Because we have so much research now that says if there is a fountain of youth, it's exercise. And there's two basic kinds of exercise, aerobic, meaning with oxygen, and anaerobic, without oxygen. Anaerobic is considered to be basically like weight training type stuff. And oxygen are the things that you're moving around, you're swimming, you're running, you're jumping, you're bicycling, you're doing those kinds of things. And we have research about both of these things. One of the research studies that I read that was fascinating is that jogging actually reversed aging. I mentioned before that the only other thing I ever read that reversed aging was thoughts of gratitude. So I have learned to combine the two. And whenever I finish a jog, I go, oh, thank God. Having the ability to move is what people are saying. There's a study where walking blew away Zoloft, the University of Duke study. At first they were neck and neck, but as the study continued, the walkers overcame and stayed better. That they did not relapse into their depression like the people who took the Zoloft. You can look these studies up. There's an anxiety study that came out of Sweden, and what they found is that exercise is the best treatment for anxiety, and the more rigorous the exercise, the better. The harder you can work out. Exercise forces you to relax. You can't be anxious after a tough workout. Your body won't let you. You've depleted your energy. A couple of incredible research studies about the brain and exercise. One of them is out of Pittsburgh. It's now a classic study. It's like at least 10 years old, I would think. But they were studying the hippocampus of the brain. And the hippocampus is like the memory center of the brain. And they were seeing, what happens to the hippocampus over a year's time. The research up to that point said that there is shrinkage that occurs in the hippocampus when you hit like age 55 to 60, and it continues to shrink. That's the memory center. That's the normal human brain. That's not even Alzheimer's. So in this study, they divided people up into three groups. The first group, they said, for the next year, you're going to do nothing. And everyone applauded because they were good at that. And then the second group, they said, you're going to do light stretching and yoga. And the third group, they said, you people are going to walk 40 minutes a day, 3 times a week. That's not a lot. 3 times a week, 40 minutes. Well, 1 year later, when they again measured the hippocampus of the brain, they found that the first two groups had an average shrinkage of 1%, just as they predicted. But the only reason I know about this study, and the only reason that this study is worth talking about, is that the third group, the walkers, had a 2.4% growth. Their brains, the hippocampus in the brain not only didn't shrink, but it actually grew, and it grew substantially in 1 year's time because they were walking. I mean, there's a real take home to that. If you're not moving, find something that you can do. Last study that I'm going to talk about, and then we're going to move on to chapter 2 and hopefully into 3. There's a research study out of Canada where they had older women in their 70s and 80s and such, and they were introducing them to weight training. They were teaching these little old ladies to start using dumbbells and just lifting whatever kind of weight they could at that age. And much to the researchers' amazement is that they noticed from the weightlifting that the brain was repairing itself. There were potholes in the white matter of the brain that were being filled in. There was repair work going on, signs, women at work, and they were filling in these potholes just from doing weight training. And I would imagine, this being Canada, it's probably even better in the States because of the exchange rates. I don't know. But all of these things to say, if you're not exercising, try to find at least a half hour a day to do something. And that could be in increments of 5 minutes. You could literally get up from whatever you're doing and stretch and throw your arms out and, move your legs around. Just walk, just swim. There's water aerobics. There's the stationary bike. There's ellipticals. There's like the best weight loss exercise I read about was the climbers. The whatever they call those. You're on it's like a treadmill, but there's steps. Anyway, anytime you're climbing steps, you're burning calories. So there's my forgive. If you practice those 7 things, chances are you'll improve your mental and physical health. And none of those are in the first book, Your Mind. They were added to the Social Black Belt book. But this allows us to go on to chapter 2, which is about compulsive behavior, and that you can change your compulsive behavior. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. The actual truth says you can change your compulsive behavior if you change your thoughts and address your feelings. I want to teach one thing only in chapter 2 because of the time restrictions of only 5 hours. But the thing I want to teach is that there are 3 ways. I've been talking about your feelings, emotions, same thing. There are 3 ways to change how you feel. And that's in chapter 2. And the 3 ways, first of all, is one that everybody knows. It's biochemically. Second is the sensory motor system. And third is cognitively. Now, what does all that mean? I want to make this simple and I want to make it practical. All right. So I said biochemically. Everybody knows that you can change your feelings by altering the biochemistry of your brain. That means you can drink something, smoke something, snort something, shoot something, swallow something. All those things work. They work to change the biochemistry of the brain, and they change how you feel. And the good news is they really do work. The bad news is they don't work for very long. And lots of times there's addictive issues and they can be very bad for you. And, we already know how dangerous it is to drink to excess. You don't even have to drink to excess. They're saying you really shouldn't be drinking more than a couple of drinks a week. It's not how we once thought. It's pretty poisonous. We know how bad smoking is. There's a lot of research on how bad marijuana is, especially when you smoke it. A lot of you take medication. Okay, it's under doctor's orders, but you can change how you feel biochemically is the point. And it's especially if you're doing illicit and illegal drugs, it's a very short-term turnaround, and then you're going to want to do it again because it does work, but it doesn't last. And so it leads to this cycle that brings about physiologic addiction and psychological reliance. So anyway, that's one of the 3 ways to change how you feel. The second way to change how you feel is through your sensory motor system. What does that mean? That means you can run, jump, scream, cry, express your feelings, do 50 push-ups, anything that you exert physical energy or express human emotion. You can do that in meditation, prayer, relaxation. All those things through your sensory motor system will change how you feel. Some of those things are very, very good for you. I mean, if you said I'm in a bad mood, one of the first things I might say to you is, let's go for a walk. Would that work? Yeah, it works. Does it change all your problems and make your life better? Not necessarily, but right now, you can have a shot, you can smoke something, but you could go for a walk. These are short-term kinds of remedies, but yet if you're doing healthy things, like we mentioned, expressing feelings, prayer, physical exercise, meditation, we have research on all of those things. They all can be long-term positive things in your life to change your emotions. The third way to change how you feel in the here and now is to change how you think. To change how you think. I just did a video that put up on YouTube a week ago. And in the video, I was talking about being in a not so great place with my 16-year-old daughter being mad at me for, trying to protect her from an older guy, and, thinking I'm not going to see her for Father's Day, and feeling, sad and sorry for myself, thinking, I've loved her, I've been good to her for 16 years and so forth. And then I just had a change of thought, which is get over yourself. Get over yourself. This is not about you. This is, Father's Day, you want to make a difference? My 12-year-old son's buddy has never even met his father. Let's go take him fishing. My nephew lost his father, my brother, last year. Let's take him fishing too. Let's get my mind off of me. Let's do something. Let's change my perspective here. I can be the best father I know how to be, but my report card is not how my daughter feels at any given time. As so many people wrote me after the video was posted, that if you're not getting your kids upset, you're probably not doing your job as a father. Sometimes they're going to be upset with you because there are things like boundaries, there are things like responsibilities, there are rules. Anyway, point is, I had to think differently in order to feel differently. Cognitive therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, it's been the rage for like the last 20 years. And what's the cognitive about? It's learning to think differently. What did I just say with with gratitude, with positivity and optimism, that these with forgiveness. I have to change my way of thinking to have the most permanent results. There are so many people who, after they express a problem, can identify this is a first world problem. This is not a big thing. There are, I have to change my way of thinking. There are other people who say, listen, if you can throw money at this and fix it, it's not really a problem. How we get ourselves down so often, and I mentioned last time that depressed people think differently. Anxious people think differently. You want to get well, you have to learn to think differently. So in this second truth, we talk about you want to feel differently. Here's 3 ways. And sometimes when you're in therapy, you know what you're doing? You're doing all 3 of those things. You're taking prescribed medication for whatever your disorder is. You're definitely doing exercise, and maybe you're doing prayer, meditation, relaxation exercises. You're doing all of those things, and then you're learning how to think differently. You're learning how to let go of everything you can't fix, change, or control. You're learning how to de-emphasize things that don't matter. I'm working with a woman right now. I think she's pretty amazing because she's like in her 60s, and she's been anxious throughout her life. And she's reading my anxiety book, and I'm teaching her basic things about anxiety, and she's learning that she doesn't have to be so anxious. After all these years of being an anxious person, she's going like, I'm not so anxious now, because one of the things she's doing is she realizes if I can't change it, if I can't fix it, I got to let it go. And she lets it go. And then she learns other things, like to ask herself, where's the threat here? Is this a threat? Is this something I need to just decide this doesn't matter as much as I'm letting? I got to let it go. She's imagined stopping being an anxious person at this stage of her life. And it's because she's changing. She's reprogramming her mind. It's amazing. Let me dive into the third truth because it's one of my favorites, and it really merits some time because it's chock full of good stuff. And it's basically our behavior is purposeful, it's goal oriented, and you can understand why you do what you do. Let's see how it was written in the book, the third truth. Every behavior, I'm not saying I can read well. Every behavior has an underlying purpose, and it's not always what we think. Why do we do what we do? All behavior is purposeful. We always get something from the way we think and what we do. There's always a payoff or we wouldn't do it. There's a wonderful movie that goes back into my teenage years. One movie of the year, it was called Annie Hall. It's a Woody Allen movie, and whatever you think of Woody Allen is not the point here. The point is there's a great little line he throws in the book, and he says, there's an old joke about a guy who goes to a shrink, and he goes, hey, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken. And the shrink says, well, why don't you turn him in? And the guy goes, I would, but I need the eggs. And the joke is, we get something from whatever it is we do, or we wouldn't do it. All behavior has purpose. All behavior gives us some kind of payoff, or we wouldn't do it. I had a patient on my couch today saying that she actually taught herself to behave with OCD behaviors, obsessive compulsive behaviors, because she felt like when she was doing certain things, it gave her more control. So she'd be in a situation where her mother would be very upset and raging or something, and she felt like if she crossed her legs or if she did something with her hands or whatever, then she was executing some kind of control over the situation. you show me the most bizarre behavior, and I'll say there's a payoff in that bizarre. I might say, God, I've never seen anything like it. That's crazy. But there's a payoff or the person wouldn't be doing it. So let's talk about some basic human behaviors. Let's talk about lying. Why do people lie? Well, there's a very simple answer to that. People lie in order to protect themselves from the consequences of telling the truth. There's a wonderful true story in the original book about my colleague and dear friend, Jill Scarpolini, a psychologist. And, and Dr. Scarpolini at the time had a boy who was 2 years old, David. David's now like 19. So it's how old this story is. So David's in a room by himself. And his mother walks into that room and looks around, and everything is in disarray. And little David looks up at mom and says, mess. And mom, Jill, ever the psychologist, says, yes. And how do you suppose it got that way, David? And David, without missing a beat, looks at her and goes, Grandpa. It's a beautiful story because he's 2 years old and he already knows that I can avoid responsibility and then maybe there won't be consequences. And I don't mind throwing grandpa under the bus. 2 years old, you can understand that story easily, excuse me, because the behavior is motivated by, I don't want to get in trouble. So there's all kinds of things that people do, excuse me, where there's a payoff. Teenage girls, not just girls, but a lot of teenage girls are into self-mutilation, cutting. Why do they cut? What could you possibly get from taking a knife and slicing up your arm or your inner thigh or wherever it is you're cutting? To a person, these people will tell you, yeah, it hurts, but it feels like I'm controlling the narrative here. This is me causing the pain. And there's a sense of release and relief. There's a purging. When the blood flows, there's a release of some of that pain, and it's a reduction of anxiety. The point being, there's a purpose to behavior, even if it seems like destructive behavior. Nobody smokes cigarettes to get lung cancer. Nobody. People smoke cigarettes not because of what it does to them. They smoke because of what it does for them. You know what it does for them? They'll tell you that it makes them feel relaxed. It makes them feel sometimes kind of euphoric and positive. And they'll tell you that if I don't, it's really hard. Once you get addicted, try not doing it. There's all kinds of pain and anxiety and suffering. It's a miserable thing to withdraw from nicotine. Why are people smoking? Because of what it does for them, not what it does to them. Why do people gossip? You would think gossiping is a behavior that can cause a lot of pain to people when they find out that people are talking about them negatively. Well, try this sometime if you're not aware of what gossiping can do for you. Go into a room and say, hey, how's everybody doing? And people might look up at you and go, good, how are you? But if you go in that same room and you say, hey, did you hear what Randy did last night with Mary? You have suddenly every eye in the room on you. Everybody's paying attention because you're about to drop the goods on them. When you gossip, you get attention. There's a payoff. And you can feel like you have something to contribute. it's a nice feeling to have everybody focus on you for a change. I mentioned Alfred Adler before, and Alfred Adler, one of the other things that he wrote about that I really appreciated was that he would talk about goals of misbehavior in children. Why do children misbehave? And there's nothing definitive about this, except he said, here's 4 reasons why children misbehave. The first reason, everybody knows, every parent in the world, you say, why do children misbehave? Sometimes it's for the attention. That children will do things sometimes because, there's no other way to get their name called out in class or put on the board unless they misbehave. There's no way they're going to compete with those kids up front. They're way too smart. But I can get my name called more than that. Bug is back. I don't know. Tell me if it lands on you can't talk to me. That's right. All right. But if I start swatting through the air, it's that bug. I don't know if it's a fruit fly. I don't know if it's one of these flies that's doing an internship and has to take mental health classes or what, but that's why I'm doing this. Anyway, so what were we talking about? Oh, the 4 goals of misbehavior. The attention. If I can get someone's attention by misbehaving, it's better than no attention at all. I'd rather you notice me than find me invisible. Okay. The second one is that sometimes it's for control. Sometimes it's to have power and control. And so kids will misbehave because they can feel like they're more empowered by doing whatever it is they're doing than if they try to comply with whatever is adults are demanding. So again, power and control. The third one is revenge. Sometimes children are misbehaving because they're trying to send a message to you. I was kind of alluding to that with my daughter earlier, that it's a strong message to say, I'm not going to send you a card or see you for Father's Day. The message is, I want to hurt you because you hurt me. You'll see with little kids sometimes that they'll not look at you. They won't eat their dinner. They'll give you 1-word answers. How was school today, Billy? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Well, what about that science thing? How's that going? Okay. That's lots of times there's a message in that. The message is, I'm angry with you. And I don't want to play your games and answer your questions. I want you to know how mad I am and how hurt I am, and I want you to feel it. But the fourth one is a display of inadequacy. Sometimes children are misbehaving because they're trying to let you know, I'm not doing well. I'm not doing, and this happens with adults too. Sometimes young adults or even later, they'll leave things around like stupid things because you could say, oh my God, that's drug paraphernalia. They'll leave them around, or they'll leave evidence around that they're having an affair. Why are you doing this? Why would you want your wife to know? Well, I don't, but part of them does. They want to get caught because they're miserable and they're trying to send a message, I'm not doing well here. Behavior is purposeful, but it's not just things that we do that we could say, hey, there's purpose to that behavior. There's purpose to that behavior. There's also things that we hold on to. And this is, I never read this anywhere. I just kind of figured this out, that this fascinated me, that we can hold on to things as a way to protect ourselves also. There's a payoff in holding on to things. So let's talk about some of the most important things that people hold on to. Oh my God, I got 4 minutes left. Jeez. All right. So one of the things that people hold on to is worry. Yeah, worry actually is a behavior that has a payoff. Really? Worry is a payoff? Well, it makes me crazy. It makes me sick. It makes me an anxious mess. But there's a payoff to worry, or we wouldn't do it. Any one of these things that people hold on to, there's a payoff, or they wouldn't do it. Well, what's the payoff to worry? The payoff to worry is the vast majority of things that we worry about never happen. So when we worry, it feels like it's empowering us to stave off the worst possible outcomes. A video I posted, I don't know, a month or two ago, I borrowed affectionately from Sesame Street. And it featured Ernie and Bert. And Bert goes up to Ernie and says, "Hey, Ernie, why do you have a banana in your ear?" And Ernie says, "It's to keep the alligators off Sesame Street." And Bert goes, "What? Alligators?" He looks around, he goes, "There's no alligators on Sesame Street." And Bert goes, "See, it works." That's a beautiful illustration, in my opinion, as to why and how we worry. And why do we worry? Because the law of association, this is a psychological law. Two things that occur together, even if there's no relationship between the two things that occur together are associated. So if I stick a banana in my ear and my team wins tonight, I may associate my behavior with the victories. That's called superstitious behavior. Every sports fan in the world knows about this. Every sports fan could tell you what ritual we do to try and help our teams to win. And it all started with something that happened with that particular thing. I played softball for years with a guy. I loved him to pieces, except he stunk. And he stunk because he would never wash his shirt. He couldn't wash his shirt because the one time that shirt got all sweaty and smelly, his team came back and won. So he thought he would never wash the shirt again. And so when I was playing shortstop, he was playing third, I would find myself cheating more towards second base, not because the hitter would hit it there, because I didn't want to smell the third baseman. Anyway, there's a great story of a woman who goes to the bathroom in the fourth quarter of a football game while her husband's watching. And while she's in the bathroom, this is a true story, his team scores 2 touchdowns. They were losing by 7. Now they're up by 7. And it all happened when she went into the bathroom. So he runs to the door and he starts to barricade it and says, "Honey, you can't come out of the bathroom until the end of the game." She says, "What are you talking about? I don't need this thing." He goes, No, listen, I'll get you some food. Whatever, what do you want? And she goes, "Why would I want food? I'm in the bathroom. I don't want to eat in here." But she didn't understand. Of course, she should be locked in the bathroom, because the bathroom must have been the reason why his team scored 2 touchdowns and came back. Two things that occur together, right? The law of association. So why do we worry? Because worry makes us feel like we have control, pseudo control. It makes us feel like we have some empowerment, some say over something. If we just do this, maybe it's a ritual, maybe it's the rosary, maybe it's a prayer, whatever it is we do, we're trying to get some control where otherwise there isn't any control. And when bad things don't happen, we end up saying somewhere in our heads, that worked. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do that again because I want the same outcome. How many times have the hurricanes been aiming like right for my house on Siesta? And for whatever reason, they always turn off at the last minute. I don't wish them to hurt anybody else, but I'm always relieved. And I always think, what is it that I did? How did I make that happen? I want to do it. I want to do that the next time, because I don't like being powerless. We worry to give ourselves a sense of power. It's already 7:01. Should I be asking for questions and try to pick up at this point? Next time, Taylor, are you still awake? Is anybody awake? I'm still talking to an audience of one. It's the bug. The only thing I've seen this whole hour is the myself and this bug.
I'm
So
so sorry. Yes, I am still here. Thank you so much. If anybody has questions, we can utilize the Q&A box. Also, thank you everybody for joining. I am going to drop a link in the chat box if you could just fill that out so we could get some feedback on our webinar. And it looks like we do have something in the chat. So give me one moment. Not a question, but fabulous presentation.
I'll send you a check, Christine, whoever you are, you know, whatever we agreed upon. Thanks for saying that. Appreciate that. Anybody else want to say really encouraging things? I'm happy to answer any kind of question, except if it's about pest control, because obviously I lost that battle because I think this guy is still flying around.
I think you did a great job swatting the fly. Does not are you're able to see this feedback, right? Because I gave you host access.
Um,
Oh.
oh, these people are all saying really nice things. Wow. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. All nice, nice people. Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cortman. And also just to note, if anybody registered for the session part 3, we did have to change the date. So it's now going to be taking place on July 25th at the same time, 6 p.m. Also, it's going to be the same link as well.
Yeah, we were going to do it on what was the date? The third Thursday, the 18th.
Yes.
But I am going to, and I want everybody to feel good about this. I am going to be in Greece on a cruise ship that night. I'd still do it, but it would be what, midnight in Greece? Because they're like 6 hours ahead. You guys up for a midnight? Nah, maybe we should just make it the next week.
You don't want to rub it in our face.
it's it's nice to get a vacation every once in a while.
Yes. Also, we will be sending out the recording to the webinar. So if you missed any parts, want to send it to a friend, I will be sending that out tomorrow.
Yeah, the fact that it's recorded, anybody can hear the first one if they missed it. And there's one. You can't go away, Dr. Cortman. Jeez. All right, forget Greece. Never mind. I've been talked out of it. Yeah, so anyone who's missed any one of these, we'll make sure they can see it. And I'm going to try and get as many of the 10 truths in. I just want everything to make sense and be practical and useful. That's my goal. So thank you, everyone. Any last questions? If not, I'm going to dinner.
Me too.
Taylor,
Thank you.
thanks for setting these things up. Are you going to show anybody pictures of your baby next time?
Oh yeah, I can put her on the screen.
Yeah, put her on the screen. She's so cute.
Oops, she's
Hi,
kicking me.
sweetie.